The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It was the kind of rain that soaked through everything, making the streets shine like mirrors under the streetlights. In downtown Portland, most people hurried past with their umbrellas, eager to get home or into somewhere warm and dry. At the back door of Giuseppe's Italian restaurant, a young woman stood hesitating. Her name was Maya Chen, and she was 22 years old, though the past year had aged her in ways that didn't show on her face. Her backpack hung heavy on her shoulders, everything she owned stuffed inside. Her shoes, once white sneakers, were now held together with strips of duct tape across the soles. Water dripped from her dark hair, running down the collar of a jacket that had long ago stopped being waterproof. She'd walked past this restaurant twice already. Each time, she'd almost knocked, then lost her nerve and kept walking. But it was getting dark now, and she was so hungry that her hands shook. She hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days, just a granola bar someone had given her at the shelter, and half a sandwich she'd found barely touched in a park trash can. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Maya raised her hand and knocked on the metal door. 3 solid knocks that echoed in the alley. Inside, the kitchen was in full dinner rush mode. Pots clanged. Orders were shouted, and the air was thick with the smell of garlic, tomatoes, and fresh bread. When the knock came, nobody paid much attention. The dishwasher, a teenager named Carlos, was closest to the door. He wiped his wet hands on his apron and pulled it open, expecting a delivery driver or maybe someone from the restaurant next door. Instead, he found Maya standing there, dripping wet and shivering slightly, despite trying to stand still. "Can I help you?" Carlos asked, not unkindly, but with the wariness of someone who'd been taught to be careful. Maya swallowed hard. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head, but now that it was happening, the words felt stuck in her throat. "I know this is unusual," she began, her voice quieter than she'd intended. "But I wanted to ask if I could play something for you. Music, I mean, on a piano, if you have one, in exchange for a meal." Carlos blinked. He'd heard a lot of things working at this restaurant, but never that. Hold on," he said, and called over his shoulder. "Diego, come here a minute." Diego, one of the line cooks, came over wiping his hands on a towel. He was in his 40s, with tired eyes that had seen plenty of hardship themselves. He looked at Maya, taking in her condition with a glance that was more understanding than judgmental. "What's going on?" he asked. Maya repeated her offer, this time a bit more steadily. "I can play piano. I'm good at it. I just need something to eat. And I thought maybe I could perform in exchange. Just one song, that's all." Diego studied her for a moment. There was something about her that didn't quite fit the usual pattern. She wasn't aggressive or desperate in the way that set off alarm bells. She was polite, almost formal, and there was something in her eyes that spoke of education, of a life that had once been very different. "Wait here," he said finally. "Let me ask the boss." He disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving Carlos to stand awkwardly with Maya. The teenager offered her a small smile. "Cold out there, huh?" "Yeah," Maya said, managing a smile back. "Really cold." In the kitchen, Diego found Giuseppe Moretti standing at the stove, personally overseeing a special pasta dish for a regular customer. Giuseppe was 64 years old, a barrel-chested man with gray hair and hands that had been making pasta since he was 8 years old back in Naples. He'd come to America with nothing but a suitcase and his grandmother's recipes. And over 40 years, he'd built this restaurant into a neighborhood institution. "Boss," Diego said, leaning in close so the rest of the kitchen wouldn't hear. "There's a girl at the back door. She wants to play piano for food." Giuseppe didn't look up from his pan. "We're not a charity, Diego. Tell her we can't help." "I know, boss. But, no buts. We have a business to run." But before Diego could respond, Giuseppe's daughter appeared from the dining room. Lucia was 32, her father's only child, and she'd been helping run the restaurant since she was old enough to carry a tray. She'd heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "What's this about someone playing piano?" she asked. Diego explained again, and Lucia's expression shifted. "Papa, when's the last time anyone played that old piano out front? It just sits there collecting dust." Giuseppe frowned. The piano had been his wife's. Rosa had played it sometimes on slow Sunday afternoons, filling the restaurant with soft melodies that made the food taste even better. She'd been gone 3 years now, and the piano had been silent ever since. He couldn't bring himself to get rid of it, but he couldn't bear to hear it played either. "That piano is not for," he started. "Papa," Lucia said gently, putting a hand on his arm. "Mama would have wanted someone to play it. You know she would have. And it's just one song. What's the harm?" Giuseppe looked at his daughter, seeing in her face the same kind heart that Rosa had possessed. He sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that came from a place of old grief and reluctant softening. "Fine," he said gruffly. "One song. Give her some minestrone after. But that's it." Lucia's face lit up. She hurried to the back door herself, nearly running into Diego on the way. When she opened the door, Maya was still standing there, looking like she was about to give up and leave. "Hi," Lucia said warmly. "I'm Lucia. My father says you can play. Come in. Please. Get out of that rain." Maya's relief was visible. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Lucia led her through the kitchen, where the staff paused briefly to look at this dripping stranger being escorted through their domain. Maya kept her eyes down, trying to make herself as small as possible, acutely aware that she didn't belong here, that she was an intrusion on these people's normal evening. The dining room was about half full, the early dinner crowd settling in. Soft lighting made everything warm and golden. The smell of food was almost overwhelming to Maya's empty stomach. And there, in the corner, sat the upright piano. It was old, but well-maintained. Its dark wood polished to a gentle shine. Sheet music sat stacked on top, and a few wine glasses had been placed on its surface. "Let me just clear this off," Lucia said, quickly moving the glasses and papers. "Do you need a moment to warm up, or anything?" Maya shook her head. Her hands were cold, yes, but she knew they'd remember what to do. They always did. "I'm ready, whenever you are." Lucia smiled and stepped back. A few diners had noticed the commotion and were watching with curious expressions. The young woman, who'd just walked in from the rain, didn't look like their usual entertainment. Maya sat down at the bench and adjusted it slightly, her movements careful and practiced. She flexed her fingers, once, twice. Then, she placed them gently on the keys, and in that moment, just before she began to play, Maya closed her eyes and let herself remember everything that had brought her to this moment. The hours of practice as a child. Her mother's proud smile, the acceptance letter to Juilliard, the hospital bills, the funeral. All of it was about to pour through her fingers into this old piano in this small Italian restaurant where nobody knew her name or her story. She took a breath and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, like drops of water falling into a still pond. Maya's fingers moved across the keys, with a lightness that seemed impossible given how cold and stiff they must have been. But within seconds, something shifted. The hesitation vanished, replaced by a confidence that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. The melody she played wasn't anything the diners recognized. It wasn't a classical piece they'd heard on the radio, or a popular song from the charts. This was something else entirely. Something original. The left hand laid down a foundation that was rich and complex, while the right hand wove a melody that seemed to tell a story all its own. At table 7, an older couple who'd been discussing their plans for the weekend stopped mid-sentence. The woman's fork, loaded with fettuccine, hung suspended halfway to her mouth. Her husband turned in his chair to see where the music was coming from. At the bar, 2 businessmen who'd been loudly complaining about their day went silent. One of them had his phone out, about to check an email, but his thumb froze over the screen. In the kitchen doorway, Diego stood with a plate of bread in his hands, completely forgetting he was supposed to deliver it to table 3. Carlos had abandoned his dishes entirely, soapy water dripping from his gloves as he leaned around the corner to see. The music grew, building in layers. There were hints of classical training in the precision of her technique, the way her fingers flew across the keys without a single missed note. But there was also something raw and modern about it. Jazz influences that made the piece feel spontaneous and alive, like she was creating it in that very moment, rather than playing something memorized. Lucia found herself standing perfectly still, one hand pressed to her chest. She could feel her heart beating in time with the music. There was something about it that felt deeply personal. Like Maya was reaching into her own memories and emotions and somehow turning them into sound. The melody spoke of loss, but also of hope, of darkness, but also of light trying to break through. At the stove, Giuseppe had stopped cooking entirely. He stood with a wooden spoon in his hand, sauce dripping unnoticed onto the floor. His eyes had filled with tears, though he wasn't entirely sure why. The music reminded him of Rosa, of the Sunday afternoons when she'd played, filling their home with beauty. But it was more than that. There was something in this young woman's playing that spoke of suffering, of struggle, of carrying on when everything seemed impossible. Maya's eyes were closed. She swayed slightly with the music, her whole body involved in the performance. This wasn't just her fingers playing. This was her heart, her soul, everything she'd been through in the past 2 years pouring out through this old piano. Every hospital visit, every bill she couldn't pay, every night she'd cried herself to sleep in a shelter bed, every moment she'd wondered if giving up her dreams had been worth it, if her mother would have wanted her to sacrifice so much. But there was also joy in the music. The memory of her mother's smile when Maya had played for her in those final days, the kindness of strangers who'd helped her along the way, the sunrise after a particularly dark night, the feeling of her fingers on piano keys, the one constant in a life that had become unpredictable and hard. The piece built to a crescendo that made several diners gasp audibly. Maya's hands moved faster, the notes tumbling over each other like a waterfall, powerful and unstoppable. Her whole body leaned into it, the notes drawing from the instrument every ounce of sound it could give. The old piano, which had sat silent for 3 years, seemed to come alive under her touch, remembering what it was made for. Then, just when it seemed the music couldn't possibly get any more intense, Maya pulled it back. The volume dropped. The tempo slowed. Her right hand played a melody so achingly beautiful that the woman at table 7 openly began to cry, not bothering to wipe the tears that ran down her cheeks. Her husband reached over and took her hand, his own eyes wet. The final phrases were gentle, almost whispered, like a lullaby, like a goodbye, like a promise that even when things are dark, there's always the possibility of beauty, of grace, of something worth holding on to. The last note hung in the air, sustained by the pedal, gradually fading into silence. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The entire restaurant was frozen in that space between the end of the music and the return to regular life. Then, from table 7, the older man began to clap. Slowly at first, then faster. His wife joined him. Then the businessmen at the bar. Then everyone else. The entire dining room erupted in applause. People stood up from their tables. Someone whistled. Someone else shouted, "Brava!" Maya opened her eyes, looking startled, as if she'd forgotten where she was. She'd been so lost in the music that the return to the present felt jarring. She saw all these people standing, clapping for her, and her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. She stood up from the bench, not quite knowing what to do with her hands. Lucia was the first to reach her, practically running across the dining room. She grabbed Maya's hands in her own. "That was incredible," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never heard anything like that in my life. Thank you," Maya managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. She was overwhelmed, not just by the response, but by how much of herself she'd just exposed to a room full of strangers. Diego appeared with a glass of water, which Maya accepted gratefully. Her hands were shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She drank deeply, realizing how thirsty she was. The older couple from table 7 approached, the woman still dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "My dear," she said, "I've been going to concerts for 50 years. Symphony performances, jazz clubs, everything. And that was one of the most moving things I've ever heard." "Where did you study?" Maya hesitated. This was always the hard part, explaining what had happened, why someone with her talent was standing in a restaurant soaking wet, asking for food. "Juilliard," she said finally. For a while, the woman's eyebrows rose. "Juilliard. I knew it. I could hear the training. Are you performing somewhere in town? I'd love to buy tickets." "I'm not, actually. I'm just passing through." Before the woman could ask more questions, Giuseppe emerged from the kitchen. He'd wiped his face, but his eyes were still red. He walked straight to Maya, and for a moment, she thought he might be angry. Maybe she'd played his piano without proper permission. Maybe she'd disrupted his restaurant. Instead, he pulled her into a tight hug. Maya stood stiffly for a second, surprised, then felt herself relax into it. It had been so long since someone had hugged her like this, like a father hugs a daughter. When Giuseppe pulled back, he kept his hands on her shoulders. "You," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "are not eating minestrone." He turned to Lucia. "Take her to the private table. Bring her whatever she wants. Everything. Appetizers, main course, dessert, wine if she wants it. Everything." "Papa, I can't," Maya started. "You can," Giuseppe interrupted firmly. "You gave us a gift tonight. A gift I didn't even know I needed. Now, please, let me give you something in return." He guided her toward a small table in the back corner, the one usually reserved for family or special guests. Lucia brought a menu, but Giuseppe waved it away. "I'll make you something special," he said. "You sit. Rest. You're safe here." As Maya sank into the comfortable chair, she felt something break loose inside her chest. Safe. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt safe. She watched Giuseppe disappear into the kitchen, already barking orders about what ingredients he needed. Lucia brought her warm bread and olive oil, then a glass of red wine. "That piece you played," Lucia said softly, sitting down across from her. Maya nodded, tearing off a piece of bread. "I've been working on it for about 6 months. I call it The Long Road. I've never played it for anyone before tonight. The Desider. The. It was beautiful," Lucia said. "Heartbreaking, but beautiful." Maya smiled, a real smile this time. That's exactly what it was meant to be. And for the first time in a very long time, Maya Chen didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like just another person struggling to survive. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt like maybe, just maybe, things could get better after all. The pasta arrived 20 minutes later, and it was unlike anything Maya had seen in months. Giuseppe had prepared it himself. A dish he called pasta e fagioli, a hearty bean and pasta soup that his grandmother had made for him as a child in Naples. But this wasn't just any version. He'd added fresh herbs from the garden behind the restaurant, a drizzle of the expensive olive oil he saved for special occasions, and a generous handful of Parmesan cheese. Maya stared at the bowl, steam rising from it in delicate spirals. Her eyes welled up with tears. It wasn't just that she was hungry, though she was. It was the care that had gone into it. Someone had made this specifically for her, had thought about what she might need, had put love into every ingredient. "Eat," Lucia said gently, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. "While it's hot." Maya picked up her spoon with trembling hands and took her first bite. The flavors exploded on her tongue, rich and comforting and perfect. She closed her eyes, savoring it, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She tried to eat slowly, to make it last, but she was so hungry that she found herself taking spoonful after spoonful, barely pausing to breathe. Lucia sat with her, not saying much, just being present. After a while, she asked quietly, "When did you last eat a real meal?" Maya paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Tuesday, I think. There was a church that gave out lunches. But before that..." She trailed off, not wanting to admit how bad things had really been. "And where are you staying?" "There's a shelter about 2 miles from here. I have a bed there most nights, as long as I check in before 8. Lucia glanced at her watch. It was already 7:30. "You won't make it in time if you finish eating." Maya's face fell. She'd been so caught up in the warmth and safety of the restaurant that she'd lost track of time. "It's okay. I can sleep outside if I have to. It's not the first time." "Absolutely not," Lucia said firmly. "We have a storage room upstairs. It's not fancy, but there's a couch. You can stay there tonight." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will. I'm not letting you sleep on the street. Not after what you just gave us." Before Maya could protest further, Giuseppe emerged from the kitchen, carrying a small plate of tiramisu. He set it down in front of her with a gentle smile. "Dessert," he announced. "My wife's recipe." He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, as if he'd suddenly become very tired. For a moment, he just watched Maya eat the tiramisu, her expression one of pure bliss with each bite. Then he cleared his throat. "So," he said, "Juilliard. That's a very good school." Maya nodded, setting down her spoon. "It is. I was there for almost 2 years. And why did you leave?" The question hung in the air. Maya looked down at her hands, at the fingers that had just created such beauty, now wrapped around a coffee cup Lucia had brought her. She'd told this story before, to shelter workers and to the few kind strangers who'd asked. But somehow, sitting here with Giuseppe and Lucia, it felt different, more real. "My mom got sick," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "Cancer. It happened fast. One day she was fine, or seemed fine. And then suddenly she was in the hospital, and the doctors were talking about stage 4, and treatment options, and costs." She paused, taking a breath. "It was just the 2 of us. My dad left when I was 3. No other family. She'd worked 2 jobs her whole life to support us, to pay for my piano lessons, to make sure I had every opportunity she never had." Giuseppe nodded slowly, his expression understanding. He knew about sacrifice. He knew about working hard to give your children a better life. "The medical bills started coming," Maya continued. "Insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. There were experimental treatments, specialists, medications that cost thousands of dollars. I tried to do both, school and taking care of her, but it was impossible. I was failing my classes, I was exhausted, and the money." She shook her head. "I withdrew from Juilliard and got 3 jobs. I worked every hour. I wasn't at the hospital with her." "How long were you able to take care of her?" Lucia asked softly. 14 months. She fought hard. Harder than anyone I've ever known. But last January, Maya's voice cracked. She didn't make it. The table was silent except for the muted sounds of the restaurant around them. Dishes clinking, quiet conversations, life continuing as it always does. "And after?" Giuseppe asked. "After, I had nothing left. The medical bills had taken everything. Our apartment was gone because I couldn't pay rent. I sold almost everything we owned, just to cover costs. I thought maybe I could go back to school, but I'd missed too much. My scholarship was gone. I didn't have money for tuition. I didn't even have money for food or a place to stay." She laughed, a bitter sound. "Turns out being a piano prodigy doesn't mean much when you don't have a degree to prove it." "So you've been traveling," Lucia said. "Playing for money where you can. Trying to. Some cities are better than others. Street performing. Small cafes if they'll let me. Sometimes I make enough for a meal and a shelter bed. Sometimes I don't. She looked up at them, and there was a fierce pride in her eyes despite everything. But I haven't stopped playing. That's the one thing I promised my mom. That I wouldn't give up music, no matter what. Giuseppe was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands folded on the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Your mother must have been very proud of you. She was, Maya said, a small smile crossing her face. Even at the end, when she could barely speak, she'd make me tell her about music, about what I was learning, what I wanted to compose someday. She called me her little songbird. She was right to be proud. Giuseppe said, what you did for her, giving up your dream to take care of her, that takes real courage, real love. But what you played tonight, that music, that came from someone who never really gave up their dream. It just got delayed. Maya looked at him, surprised. She'd spent so many months feeling like a failure, like someone who'd thrown away their potential. Hearing Giuseppe say it differently, framing it as courage rather than defeat, something shifted inside her. Diego appeared from the kitchen, looking hesitant. Sorry to interrupt, boss. But there's someone here who wants to talk to the piano player. They all looked up to see the older man from table 7 approaching, his wife beside him. But there was also a third person with them. A younger man in his 40s wearing glasses and a thoughtful expression. I hope we're not disturbing your meal, the older woman said. But we wanted to introduce you to someone. This is Vincent Chen. He's a professor at Portland State University, in the music department. Maya's eyes widened. Vincent stepped forward, extending his hand. She shook it, feeling suddenly very aware of how she must look. Still damp, her clothes worn and wrinkled. Maya, is it? Vincent asked kindly. I happen to be having dinner here tonight. What you played was extraordinary. Really extraordinary. My friend David here insisted I come talk to you. He gestured to the older man, who smiled. I've known Vincent for 30 years, David explained. When I heard you play, I knew he needed to hear it too. I actually called him and made him come down here. Vincent laughed. He did. Interrupted my evening. But I'm very glad he did. He turned back to Maya. I understand you studied at Juilliard. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Would you be willing to play something else for me? Vincent asked. I'd love to hear more, if you're not too tired. Maya looked at Giuseppe and Lucia, uncertain. Giuseppe stood up and gestured grandly toward the piano. Please, he said. Play as much as you want. The piano is yours tonight. As Maya stood and walked back to the piano, she felt something she hadn't felt in over a year. It wasn't quite hope yet, but it was close. It was the possibility of hope, the sense that maybe, just maybe, this night wasn't just about a meal and a place to sleep. Maybe it was about something more. She sat down at the piano again, and this time when her fingers touched the keys, she played something different. Something lighter, a piece by Chopin that her mother had loved, that she'd played at her mother's funeral. As the notes filled the restaurant, Maya realized she was smiling. For the first time since her mother's death, playing didn't just hurt. And in the corner, Vincent Chen pulled out his phone and quietly began recording. Maya woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through a small window above her head. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The restaurant. The piano. Giuseppe's kindness. She was lying on a surprisingly comfortable couch in a storage room above the restaurant, covered with blankets that smelled like lavender fabric softener. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The room was, indeed, used for storage. Boxes of supplies stacked neatly along one wall. But someone had clearly tried to make it comfortable for her. There was a small table with a lamp, a folded towel with a bar of soap on top, and next to the couch, a glass of water and a granola bar. The clock on the wall read 8:30. Maya couldn't remember the last time she'd slept past dawn. In shelters, you had to be out early. On the streets, sleeping too long was dangerous. But here, she'd slept deeply and peacefully for the first time in months. A soft knock came at the door. "Maya? Are you awake?" It was Lucia's voice. "Yes, come in." Lucia entered carrying a paper bag and a to-go cup of coffee. "Good morning. I brought you some breakfast. Fresh croissants from the bakery down the street, and coffee. I wasn't sure how you'd take it, so I brought cream and sugar on the side." Maya accepted the bag with wonder. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," Lucia said, sitting down in the chair across from the couch. "But I wanted to. Also, there's something I need to tell you. After you went to bed last night, things got a bit crazy." "Crazy how?" Lucia pulled out her phone and showed Maya the screen. There was a video playing, and Maya recognized herself at the piano, playing the Chopin piece from the night before. "Diego recorded you on his phone. He posted it on social media around 11 last night, just to the restaurant's page, with a caption about this amazing pianist who'd come in. By this morning, it had been shared over 5,000 times." Maya's mouth fell open. 5,000? 5,000, Lucia confirmed. "People are calling and messaging, asking who you are, where you're performing next, if you have recordings available. One woman even said she'd pay money just to hear you play again. And that's not all." She scrolled to another app. "I set up a donation page last night. I hope you don't mind. I called it, 'Help Maya Return to Music.' I explained your situation, what happened with your mom, why you left school. I was hoping maybe we'd raise a few $100s to help you get on your feet." "And?" Maya asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "As of this morning, it's at $12,000. The coffee cup slipped from Maya's hand, splashing onto the floor. She didn't notice. 12,000? That's not possible." "It is possible. It happened. People want to help you, Maya. They're moved by your story, by your talent, by what you've been through." Lucia grabbed some napkins and started cleaning up the spilled coffee. "And there's more. Vincent, that professor who heard you last night. He called this morning. He wants to meet with you at the university today. He said something about scholarship opportunities and connecting you with people in the music community." Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. This was too much, too fast. Yesterday she'd been hungry and hopeless, and now people were donating money? A professor wanted to help her? It felt like a dream, the kind she'd wake up from, only to find herself back on a cold street corner. "Hey," Lucia said gently, noticing Maya's expression. "I know it's overwhelming, but you deserve this. You deserve help. You deserve a second chance." "I don't know what to say," Maya whispered. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. You gave us something beautiful last night. Now, let people give something back to you. Okay?" "Oh. Number 4. I mean active in 9. Maya nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. These were different tears than the ones she'd cried over the past year. These weren't tears of grief or frustration or exhaustion. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that felt dangerously close to hope. 2 hours later, Maya found herself walking through the campus of Portland State University with Lucia by her side. The campus was beautiful. Students, hurrying between classes. The autumn leaves creating a carpet of red and gold on the pathways. Maya felt out of place in her worn clothes, even though Lucia had helped her wash up and had given her a clean sweater to wear. Vincent's office was in the music building, an older structure with high ceilings and the faint sound of piano scales drifting from practice rooms. He greeted them warmly at the door, his office cluttered with sheet music and books about music theory. "Maya, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've been thinking about you since last night. I even went back and watched the video Diego posted about a dozen times. I still can't believe that video has so many views, Maya said quietly. I can believe it. What you played last night wasn't just technically impressive. It was emotionally profound. That's rare, especially in someone so young. He leaned forward in his chair. Tell me, if you could go back to school, continue your education, would you want to? More than anything, Maya said immediately. But I can't afford it. Even with what people have donated, it's not enough for a school like Juilliard, and I don't know if they'd even take me back after I left. Forget Juilliard for a moment, Vincent said. What if I told you there might be a path forward here? At Portland State, we have a music program that's smaller than Juilliard, yes, but it's excellent. We have faculty who've trained at the best conservatories in the world. We have connections to orchestras, performance venues, composition programs. Maya's heart was beating fast. Are you saying there's a scholarship? I'm saying I've made some calls this morning. To the dean of our department, to some colleagues, to people I know who support music education. Everyone I spoke to was moved by your story and impressed by your playing. We want to help you get back into music education. It won't be immediate. There are processes, applications, auditions. But if you're willing to work with us, I think we can make something happen. I don't understand, Maya said, shaking her head. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. Know me, Vincent smiled. I've been teaching music for 20 years. In that time, I've seen thousands of students. Most of them are good. Some are very good. But every once in a while, maybe once or twice in a career, you encounter someone who's truly exceptional. Someone who doesn't just play music, but lives it, breathes it, becomes it. That's what I saw in you last night. That's not something you can teach. And it's not something you let slip away. Lucia squeezed Maya's hand. Maya looked down, trying to process everything. Yesterday, she'd been invisible. Just another person struggling on the streets. Today, people were fighting to help her, to give her opportunities, to believe in her future. There's something else, Vincent said. A colleague of mine runs a concert series here in Portland. Small venues, intimate audiences, showcasing local talent. He's looking for performers for next month. I told him about you, and he wants you to play. A real concert? Maya's voice was barely a whisper. A real concert. It doesn't pay much. Maybe $500, but it's a start. It's a chance for people to hear you, for you to build a reputation again. And who knows, maybe it leads to more opportunities. Maya stood up abruptly, walking to the window. She looked out at the campus, at students walking with purpose, carrying instrument cases and backpacks full of books. A week ago, she'd walked past this very building, hungry and exhausted, thinking that world was closed to her forever. I'm scared, she admitted, turning back to face them. What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if I've lost too much time? What if people help me, and I let them down? You won't, Lucia said firmly. Did you hear yourself play last night? That wasn't someone who's lost their talent. That was someone who's been refined by struggle, who has more to say now than ever before. Vincent nodded. Music isn't just about technique, Maya. It's about having something to express. You've lived through things most musicians twice your age haven't experienced. That depth, that pain, that resilience, it comes through in your playing. It makes it real. Maya closed her eyes, thinking about her mother, about the promise she'd made, about the music that had kept her going through the darkest days, about walking into Giuseppe's restaurant yesterday with nothing but hunger and a desperate hope that someone would listen. Okay, she said, opening her eyes. I'll do it. The concert, the applications, all of it. I'll try. Vincent stood and extended his hand. That's all anyone can ask. Now, let's talk about next steps. First, we need to get you registered as a prospective student. Then we need to schedule a formal audition, and you'll need letters of recommendation. I can write one, Lucia offered immediately. And I bet my father would too. Perfect, Vincent said. And I'll write one as well. By the time we're done, you'll have a complete application package. As they talked through the details, Maya felt something shifting inside her. The numbness that had protected her for so long was cracking, letting in light. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. She'd survived by not hoping for too much, by keeping her expectations low. But now, people were asking her to hope again, to dream again, to believe that her story wasn't over, that it was just beginning a new chapter. When they finally left Vincent's office an hour later, the sun was high in the sky. Students were gathered on the lawn, some studying, some playing frisbee, some just talking and laughing. Normal college life. The kind of life Maya had thought was lost to her forever. You know what? Lucia said as they walked back toward the parking lot. I think we should celebrate. You're going to be performing in a concert. You're applying to school. You have people supporting you. This calls for ice cream. Maya laughed, a real laugh that felt strange after so many months. Ice cream sounds perfect. As they walked toward the ice cream shop down the street, Maya allowed herself to feel something she'd been afraid to feel. Not just hope, but joy. Pure, simple joy at being alive. At having another chance. At discovering that even in the darkest moments, there were still people who cared, who helped, who believed in the possibility of better days ahead. 6 months passed like a dream Maya kept thinking she'd wake up from. But she didn't wake up, because it wasn't a dream. It was real. All of it. The small apartment above Giuseppe's restaurant became her home. Giuseppe had insisted she stay there rent-free until she got back on her feet, refusing every attempt Maya made to pay him. You make my restaurant special, he'd said simply. That's payment enough. 3 evenings a week, she played piano during dinner service. And the restaurant had become so popular, they had to start taking reservations weeks in advance. The fundraiser Lucia had started eventually raised over $40,000. People from all over the country had contributed, moved by Maya's story and her talent. With that money, Maya had been able to pay off the remaining medical debt from her mother's treatment, something that had weighed on her like a stone around her neck. The rest she'd saved for school expenses and living costs. Portland State had offered her a full scholarship after her audition. The panel of professors had sat in stunned silence after she played, and Vincent later told her that one of them, a woman who'd trained at the Paris Conservatory, had actually cried. Maya was now officially a student again, taking classes in composition, music theory, and performance. It felt surreal to walk across campus with books in her bag, to sit in a classroom. But tonight was special. Tonight was her first real concert since everything had changed. The venue was the Alberta Rose Theatre, an intimate space that held about 300 people. It was small compared to the grand concert halls Maya had once dreamed of playing, but right now, it felt perfect. Behind the curtain, she could hear the murmur of the gathering crowd, the sound of seats filling up, programs rustling. She wore a simple black dress that Lucia had helped her pick out, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands were shaking slightly as she went through her warm-up exercises backstage, running through scales to calm her nerves. There was a knock at the dressing room door. Maya? You have some visitors, said Thomas, the stage manager. The door opened, and Giuseppe walked in, dressed in his best suit. Lucia beside him, in a beautiful blue dress. Diego and Carlos from the restaurant were there too, looking uncomfortable in their formal clothes but grinning widely. We couldn't miss this, Giuseppe said, pulling Maya into a hug. Our little songbird's first concert. Maya felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I'm so nervous. What if I mess up? What if people are disappointed? You won't mess up, Lucia said firmly. And even if you did, which you won't, everyone out there already loves you. They're here because they believe in you. Vincent's out there, Carlos added excitedly. And I saw some people from the news. And that woman from the symphony who came to the restaurant that one time. This is a big deal, Maya. That's not helping with the nerves, Maya said. But she was smiling. Giuseppe took both her hands in his weathered ones. Listen to me. When you sit down at that piano, forget about all those people. Just play. Play like you did that first night in my restaurant. When it was just you and the music, and a room full of strangers who became friends. That's all this is. Just play from your heart. Maya nodded, squeezing his hands. Thank you. For everything. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't let me play that night. I know exactly where you'd be, Giuseppe said. You'd be somewhere else, playing for someone else, because talent like yours doesn't stay hidden. I'm just grateful it was my door you knocked on. After they left, Maya sat alone for a moment, centering herself. She thought about her mother, wishing desperately that she could be here to see this. But, in a way, Maya felt like she was here. Every note she played carried a piece of her mother with it. The woman who'd sacrificed everything so her daughter could pursue music. 5 minutes, Maya. Thomas called through the door. This was it. Maya stood, smoothed down her dress, and walked toward the stage entrance. She could hear Vincent's voice over the speaker system, introducing her to the audience. He told them her story. How she'd walked into a restaurant 6 months ago with nothing but her talent and her courage. How the community had rallied around her. How she represented the power of second chances and the resilience of the human spirit. Then the curtain began to rise, and Maya walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and thunderous. The theater was packed, every seat filled. Maya's eyes scanned the crowd and saw so many familiar faces. Giuseppe and Lucia in the front row, Vincent beaming from the side. David and his wife, the couple from that first night at the restaurant. There were reporters with cameras, students from the university, and dozens of strangers who'd followed her story online, who'd donated to her fundraiser, who'd been moved by the video of her playing and wanted to witness her comeback in person. But Maya also noticed empty seats scattered throughout the audience. At first, she was confused, until she saw the small cards placed on them. Each card had a name. She squinted to read the closest one and felt her breath catch. The names were of people who couldn't afford tickets, but wanted to be here. Maya had insisted that a portion of the tickets be given away free to those who needed them. Music shouldn't only be for people who could pay, she'd argued. These empty seats represented people who were working night shifts, caring for sick family members, or dealing with their own struggles. The cards were there to honor their presence in spirit. Maya sat at the grand piano in the center of the stage, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. The audience quieted, waiting. In that moment before she began, Maya felt completely present, not worried about the future, not haunted by the past, just here, now. She began with the piece she'd played that first night at Giuseppe's, The Long Road. But it sounded different now. It still had the pain and struggle woven through it, but there was something else too. There was hope. There was gratitude. There was the joy of someone who'd been lost and found their way home. As her hands moved across the keys, Maya lost herself in the music the way she always did. The theater disappeared. The audience disappeared. There was only the piano and the melody and the story she was telling without words. The story of a girl who'd lost everything and discovered what really mattered. The story of kindness from strangers. The story of a community that wrapped its arms around someone who needed help. The story of never giving up, even when giving up seemed like the only option left. The piece built to its powerful crescendo. Maya's whole body engaged in the performance, pulling every ounce of emotion from the instrument. Then it softened into the gentle, hopeful conclusion she'd added recently. Notes that seemed to say that even after the darkest night, morning always comes. When the final note faded, there was a beat of silence. Then, the audience erupted. People rose to their feet, applauding wildly. Maya opened her eyes, slightly disoriented as she always was, when returning from that deep place where music took her. She stood and took a bow, overwhelmed by the response. But she wasn't done. She had an entire program prepared, pieces by Chopin and Debussy and Gershwin, composers her mother had loved. She played for 90 minutes, taking the audience on a journey through joy and sorrow, playfulness and depth. And at the very end, she played something new. A composition she'd finished just last week, one she'd been working on since that first night at the restaurant. "This final piece," she said into the microphone, her voice shaking slightly, "is called Pasta e Fagioli. It's dedicated to Giuseppe Moretti, who reminded me that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can change everything. And to my mother, who taught me that music isn't just something you do. It's who you are." The piece began softly, like a memory. It captured the warmth of that small restaurant, the sound of rain outside, the feeling of being cold and hungry, and finding unexpected grace. It built into something larger, a celebration of human connection, of the ways strangers become family, of how broken things can be made whole again. When it ended, Maya looked out at the audience with tears streaming down her face. Giuseppe was openly weeping, Lucia's arm around his shoulders. Vincent was nodding with satisfaction, as if seeing something he'd always known would come to pass. And throughout the theater, people were on their feet, not just applauding but cheering, some wiping their own tears. Maya took her final bow and walked off stage, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Thomas met her with a huge grin. "They're calling for an encore. Are you up for it?" Maya laughed, wiping her eyes. "Always." She walked back onto the stage and sat at the piano once more. This time, she played something simple and beautiful, a lullaby her mother used to hum when Maya was small. She played it as a thank you, to everyone who'd helped her, to everyone who'd believed in her, to life itself for giving her another chance. Later, at the small reception, Maya was surrounded by well-wishers. A representative from a recording company gave her a card. A concert promoter wanted to book her for a series of performances. A journalist asked for an interview. But the moment that mattered most was when Giuseppe pulled her aside. "Your mother would be so proud," he said simply. "I know," Maya whispered. "I finally feel like I'm honoring her sacrifice. Like I'm becoming the person she always believed I could be." "You already were that person," Giuseppe said. "You just needed to remember." As Maya looked around the room at all the people who'd become part of her new life, she understood something profound. 6 months ago, she'd knocked on a door, asking for food in exchange for a song. What she'd received was so much more than a meal. She'd received community. She'd received purpose. She'd received the reminder that even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone. The road ahead was still uncertain. She had years of school left. Her career was just beginning. There would be challenges and setbacks and days when doubt crept in. But Maya knew now that she could face whatever came, because she'd already survived the worst. And she'd learned that sometimes, the very thing that breaks you open is what lets the light in. That night, walking home through the Portland streets with Lucia beside her, Maya looked up at the stars and smiled. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, not because life had gone according to plan, but because she'd had the courage to keep playing her song, even when no one seemed to be listening. And now, finally, the whole world was listening.